Everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the Revenue Diaries. Before I get into the content, I just wanted to thank my sponsor, Share Your Genius. They are a great media company. They help me with this podcast. Brilliant editors, brilliant practitioners. If you're looking to start a podcast or you just want to talk to somebody about content production in general, highly recommend you reach out to Share Your Genius at shareyourgenius.com. They are the ones listening to this, editing this, making this sound amazing. So thank you, Share Your Genius. So today's episode, I'm talking to Elaine Zelby, co-founder of a company called Tofu, T-O-F-U. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the company because today it's all about Elaine. I met Elaine at a Pavilion CMO event and I just loved the energy. I loved everything about her. She lives life at 3x speed. I'm pretty sure she's going to listen to this podcast at like 5x speed, which is crazy to me because I only listen to things at like 1x. But she has a maker mindset. She focuses on career growth. She loves talking to people and giving away things for free. She actually has an energy of like 5 people. I highly recommend you checking her out. I highly recommend Tofu, but I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Elaine. Welcome to episode 7 of the Revenue Diaries. I'm joined by Elaine Zelby. Elaine, thank you for coming on. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Cal.
So again, for those of you that might be tuning in for the first time, Revenue Diaries, Elaine didn't get any of the questions ahead of time. And the whole point of this conversation is to talk about everything other than work, even though it pretty much comes up anyway, as I've had these discussions with people, because work is something very important to a lot of people that I talk to. As myself, I do love what I do, and I know that Elaine does as well. But we're going to start with the first question, which is parenting, motherhood. You co-founded a company and you're running marketing for a company, and you have, how many kids do you have?
Two little ones.
2 kids, 2 little ones. How do you manage it all? Like I can barely manage it, and I'm not co-founding and running marketing like for a company that is my idea. How do you manage it all?
I have one other thing to add to the mix. Guess what my husband does for work?
I think
He's
I know.
also a startup founder. So we're doing the 2-company, 2-kid thing. It's funny. I think on a daily basis, people are horrified. I get at least 1 to 2 horrified comments of like, how are you starting a company and your husband's doing a company?
You really have 4 children.
We have 4 children, and my husband's a solo founder, so that is also my baby. I always tell people it's totally doable. Is my life easy? Absolutely not. But did I know what I was signing up for? 100%. And I think for me, it's about ruthless prioritization. So my day is pretty scheduled and pretty structured. During the work week, it's kind of like from 6:30-ish to 8 is get the kids up, dressed, fed, all of that. I have the luxury of having a nanny for the baby. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. One of us takes the toddler to preschool. And then from 8 to 5, I'm working. And then from 5 to 8, that's family time. And then from 8 to 11, I work again. And that's just my schedule. And then the weekends, I will say the one thing I had to give myself a bit of grace on was when I had the second baby. One baby, easy peasy. One of us could always have the kid. The other one could have some time to do stuff. Second baby throws a whole wrench into that mix. So I found myself on the weekends getting really frustrated that I had a lot of stuff I wanted to do to be productive at work, and it wasn't happening. And so I started just giving myself grace of saying, you know what? I'm just not going to be that productive on the weekends, and that's okay. And once I started letting myself have permission to do that, things got a lot easier from that perspective.
Did it come to a head, or did you just have to sit down and say, hey, Elaine, we've got to make some compromises here because of X, Y, and Z? Or was there like one specific situation where you're like, this is not working, I have to change it?
It was honestly pretty obvious pretty quickly that it just was not feasible. It wasn't even like, if I changed things, I could make it work. It was like, there is 0 chance that this is going to work. And I just had to have that conversation with myself of saying, cool, that's the new reality. Let's just work with it and figure out how to make it work.
So I have a real hard time working after 8 p.m. I don't understand how people can do everything during the day. I also get up at 4:30 in the morning, so I get up pretty early. When the kids go to bed, I'm like, I'm done. I have to go to bed. I'm done. There's nothing that's going to happen after 8:30. How do you manage energy levels to maintain some type of function after they go to bed?
That's just a disposition thing. My husband's more like you. He goes to bed at 8:39, which is also nice for me because I get alone time.
You get alone time. Right.
No one is bothering me. I'm a night owl. If I could, I would stay up until 1 a.m. every single day. I try to go to bed around 11:30 just because I need to sleep. But he goes to bed super early, wakes up between anywhere 3 and 5, which to me is an ungodly hour. So I think for me, I naturally have a lot of energy at night and I'm a zombie in the morning. I try to do some form of exercise every single morning. If I don't, I'm literally a zombie.
Okay, so you're just a night owl. Yeah, I've never been that way. I can't do it. All right, so I mean, because you work constantly and because you have a family and because you have a lot going on and you have to ruthlessly prioritize, the second question is, if you had to completely unplug from tech and everything you're doing for a month, what would you do with your time? And a month, that's a long time. A month is a long time.
This one's actually really easy for me. I would literally just go backpacking and camping for a month. I've done month-long trips.
Where would you
before.
Go? Where?
I've never been to Alaska, so that's very high on my list. I got into mountaineering for a while. There's some mountains in South America. Antisana and Ilinitsa are two on my list. I have a few on my bucket list that I'd love to do. At some point, I'd love to go to the Himalayas, to Nepal, Tibet, that area. But even within California, there's so much I haven't explored. I have the luxury of being able to drive in a few hours and be in just gorgeous mountains and national parks or state parks or things like that. So for me, that's an easy one. My dream at some point in my life is to own essentially an adult weekend camp that's a maker camp where we take over a kid's summer camp. But during the year, it's call it digital detox thing, but you have everything from laser cutters, 3D printers, pottery wheels, sewing stations, all kinds of makery things. And we just let adults actually make things with their hands. I feel like for most of us who are knowledge workers, we're just sitting at a computer all day long. And I think that the mechanical engineer in me just loves to build stuff. And I miss that. I miss that a lot. And I think a lot of other adults never even got exposure. That's my dream.
Yeah, well, I would come to that camp. So you have at least one customer right now. I would definitely pay for it. But because I was recently asked by somebody, hey, what hobbies do you have? And I was like, I don't actually have hobbies. I don't have hobbies, which kind of freaked me out. I was like, I'm raising 2 children with a great partner and I work a lot because I love what I do. And that's pretty much what I do. And so for me, hobby, like having some type of hobby would be great. So you mentioned the building of things, and I came across the fact that you make things out of wood and metal. So I'm guessing that's a hobby, but like, can you give me a little bit more context? Because that's all I could find is that I think it's in some bio I found that she makes things out of wood and metal. So I don't know the context there, but what is it?
I wish I had more time to do that. I think I went to Stanford for undergrad and grad school, and I was a mechanical engineering major, which also means you have a ton of access to the machine shop and a lot of other classes that allow you to make really cool stuff. Everything from robots to using a CNC and mill and lathe to do metal and wood and things like that. I got really into jewelry. So there was a course that was one of the hardest to get into. I think I applied 3 times and finally got in, which was jewelry making. It was called lost wax casting, I think is the specific way of doing it. It's kind of a crazy process. You actually take a hunk of wax and you use a bunch of these tools called Dremels and some other fine tools to carve it into the shape of what you want. You then put it on, they call it a tree, but you put it on this tree also made of wax. And then you burn out the tree to create a cavity and you melt metal and inject the metal into the cavity. And then you're left with your metal piece. So it's a very specific process of doing that. And it was fun when my husband and I were getting married. We did a lot of makery things at our wedding. We laser cut all of our table cards. We're Jewish and we did the glass that you stomp. And we went to a glass blowing studio and blew the glass. And then we made our own wedding rings. So I think this at least I get to wear every day of something I've made.
Oh, that is awesome. You said you don't have a lot of time to do it, but what do you work on if you decide I'm going to go make something? Like, what are you doing?
Right now, it's a lot of fun things for kids. So I made a busy board, if you know what that is. Or it's
I don't know. What is a busy board?
It's a huge, mine is huge. It's a huge hunk of wood, and it has all kinds of contraptions on it that keep kids busy and use fine motor skills. So things like a lock, a buckle, zippers, random things like that. We 3D printed some stuff that you can kind of take it through a maze. So it's like a piece of plastic that kind of goes through a maze, things like that. That's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm doing a lot more crafts than actual big projects, but I still enjoy the crafts.
But you see also, before we jumped on, you said your husband has a bunch of 3D printers too.
Yeah.
Right.
He's very good at that, much better than I am, but he's good at printing kids' toys. I love the fidget toys, all the fidget spinners. So we have an abundance of those in our house. It's also very practical. It's shocking. I'll say something like, oh, we need somewhere to store the batteries. And then 2 hours later, he's printed this crazy cool thing that hangs on the wall and spits out the batteries in each size. It's a pretty cool contraption.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I mean, there's a lot of rabbit holes you could go down on just the hobbying, being a hobbyist, building and making things. You actually had a newsletter. The last time you updated was probably like 2023, maybe June of 2023.
I had to stop. Part of the prioritization was when I started a company, I said I had to kill all my side projects, which was my newsletter and my podcast, which I loved, but I felt like I really needed to just focus.
Well, you'll bring it back. But the concept was you picked 3 rabbit holes to go down every week, right?
Yeah, it was called 3 Things. And the idea was I had a running spreadsheet of over 400 business ideas. And I had thought through the why now, how I would build it, how I would monetize it. And I knew I was never going to build these things, but I felt like I should just put them out into the world and see if other people wanted to build them. So this newsletter became literally a once a week, 3 ideas. Yeah. And that's what I walked through. It was why now, because that's super important, how to build it, how to monetize it. And then I often talk through, is this actually a venture fundable idea or not? And if not, that's also fine, but here's how you'd go and actually build that as a business.
So, and I encourage everybody, we're going to put a link in the show notes, but go check it out. I think it's fascinating to read anyway, and you should get back to it at some point, but I get why you prioritize what you're doing now. But like, what's the weirdest or most unexpected one that kind of stuck with you or that you're like, wow, I can't believe that I actually wrote about that?
There are so many. I have a few. Well, I'll give you one that's actually very relevant to you and your world. And it's not as weird. And then I'll give you some more weird ones. So one of them I wrote about, I think in 2020 or 2021. I like to use analogies. So I said Grin for B2B. So Grin is the biggest influencer platform for consumer. I saw the writing on the wall that this was going to translate typically 5 to 10 years late to the B2B world. And there needed to be a platform to help creators, brands, orchestrate the entire thing. I still don't think anything exists, but there will be one. And I think this is the year where we're going to see that pop. So that's an idea. I'm like, someone's going to build that. That's going to be good. Funny enough, I've had quite a few people who have written back to me saying, hey, I took your idea, I'm building it. And some people have actually even gotten venture funding. One of which is a random one that I'll talk about now. So I went down this rabbit hole around zoning and permitting. So if you wanted to go this is also in the pandemic. So there was 1,000,001 restaurants, stores, big box stores that were closing, and they're zoned for a very specific type of property. It is very complicated to either get them rezoned, permitting for any kind of construction, to change anything. Same thing with mixed use areas, all of that. And a lot of it is just bureaucracy and paperwork. So the idea was you can automate a lot of this in terms of what paperwork you need, how to fill everything out, how to submit it, how to get the funding from the government if that was required. So it was all around the permitting space and kind of the rezoning of buildings to be able to leverage the open real estate, but for use that would actually be relevant for today.
Talk me through how that idea randomly came up for you.
Like, I cannot tell you how many ideas I have. So I'll give you a day in my life.
You were writing 3 a week. I mean, that's impressive.
And 3 a week was me going through and picking the good ones. There's a lot on there that are not that good, but I see opportunity everywhere. And I think part of this could be taught. It's kind of like I always joke to people, I'm not very funny. And I wish I was funnier. And some people are like, well, that can be taught. There are certain things that make a joke or certain things that make people humorous. But I think for me, a lot of times is I notice little things that are either frustrations, things that are just feel off. So as this example, I was either running or walking in San Francisco during the pandemic, and there were so many storefronts that were closed. And I was like, what are they going to do with these buildings? Who's on the hook for this? Who owns it? Who's renting it? What are the leases? So I started thinking through all the permutations and all the implications of this. Another fun idea that came from that exact insight was, oh, well, what about advertising in the windows of the vacant spaces? Literally, you have these ability to have sensors to know how many people are walking by. You can have digital displays inside, which means you're getting revenue for the tenants or revenue for whoever's on the hook for the lease while they're unoccupied. And you can do it by week so that if somebody does go and either rent or sell this business or this property, now, great, it goes away. But think of it like a billboard inside of a building. And I went through the entire legality of this because there's laws around billboards and out-of-home advertising. However, if it's on the inside of windows, it's technically the property of the landlord or the tenant. So they could do it legally. So I go pretty deep when it comes to random thoughts.
Yeah, no wonder you had to prioritize your time. Good Lord. How much time does it take for you to research something like that? Like if you were to throw out a number.
Not that long. Part of it is I'm very auditory, so I like to listen to content. And I listen at 3x speed, which I know is also insane. That's just how fast I talk and how fast my brain processes. So you can now imagine if it's a 1 hour piece of content, I actually get through 3 hours during that time. So I can get through a lot of audio content quickly, and that's my way of consuming information. So I'll literally listen to podcasts on legal stuff or go and do searches and then turn it into audio. There's a lot of tools now that can turn text to audio. That's kind of how I do it.
Notebook LM.
Notebook
right?
LM.
Yeah, Notebook LM.
My issue with Notebook LM, though, is out of the box, it's only at 1x speed, which to me is so painful. If you're used to listening to things at 3x speed and now it goes down to 1, I have to actually take it and put it into my podcast player so that I can speed it up.
Elaine, you're living life at 3x speed, which I find very admirable, actually. All right, so you consider yourself we're going to shift a little bit on the 3x, but you consider yourself a foodie,
yes,
right? Is that a fair statement? What's the definition of a foodie? Like if you're talking to somebody and they think they're a foodie, but you're like, nah, you're not a foodie. What do you think the definition is? Like what makes me a foodie?
I'm definitely not the extreme. I have some people who are the kind of folks who have to go to every new Michelin star restaurant that opens up and things like that. For me, my definition is pretty simple. It's people who appreciate food a lot, and in particular, good food. And that doesn't necessarily mean fancy or expensive. That just means things that were done with passion, with care, and things that people treat as a craft. I'm not going to go to the Subway and get a sandwich. I'd rather go to the small store that I studied abroad in Italy, and there was this amazing thing under a bridge, tiny little hole in the wall called Peppino's, and the guy who ran it was just amazing, but everything there was just so good and so fresh, and the ingredients were amazing. And to me, that's how I think of being a foodie. It's more about that and the craft of it.
You will search that out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you live in Oakland, and apparently, I just found this out, but Oakland was named the #1 food city in the United States or the world?
In the United States last year, which is crazy, but also
by
if you
who?
live here.
Is this like the U.S. News and World Report, or is this like an actual who ranked it #1?
It was like Food and Leisure or something like that.
Oh,
it was a very reputable source, we'll put it that way.
Great.
It was funny. I didn't know until I saw the article, but I also wasn't surprised just given how Oakland is huge. It's extremely diverse. It has so many ethnic pockets, but also it's become very gentrified. There's a lot of people who've moved from San Francisco. So people who do care about that kind of stuff have moved here, which I think has brought a bigger market.
So is your favorite restaurant in Oakland, or do you have a favorite, well, other than the hole in the wall under the bridge in Italy place?
I don't know if I have an actual favorite restaurant. There's a lot of stuff I like a lot here. I mean, honestly, even just pizza. Pizza is one of my favorites. And there's a place here called Arizmendi. It's a cool concept. It's a cooperative. So it's worker owned. And they have a single pizza of the day. And they take all local ingredients. So they get all cheeses from local creameries within the Bay Area. It's all vegetarian. So it's vegetables, random sauces that they make. And it is one of the best pizzas you'll ever have. But it's interesting ingredients. They'll put like corn, queso fresco, an avocado sauce, and poblano peppers. It's just amazing. It's not for everyone, but I promise if you try it, you'll like it more than you think.
Any day of the week, if you could only pick one place to go, is that the place you would go?
Yeah. Pizza and gelato are my two favorite foods. So I think I'm Italian. I should be Italian.
How long were you in Italy?
Only 3 months. I wish I could. At some point, maybe I'll have a house in Italy. We'll see.
Oh, yeah. Well, the company's going to do great, so maybe you can. Okay, so let's do the advice question, because I usually keep this between 20 and 30 minutes.
Perfect.
We are going to talk a little bit about work. And I think it's fascinating that your background at Stanford was mechanical engineering, and you made your way into now co-founding a software company and running marketing. What advice do you have for individuals who have a technical degree that want to get into this world of building? I mean, it's still building. Like there's connection points there, but like Elaine coming out of Stanford, what advice do you have for her?
One thing I think I have a great respect for, having had a technical degree, is it teaches you analytical and systems thinking. And that will serve you your entire life and your entire career. There is nothing more important. And I will say what's really interesting and makes logical sense to me is if you look at any discipline, whether it's marketing, HR, sales, everything over time gets more data-driven, gets more analytical. And that just makes you a much more valuable person to your company, to the world. And I don't think anyone will regret that. One thing I always tell people is the way I got pretty much everything in my career was giving my time away for free. So when I was young, I would offer anything I had to offer. I would show up to all the places. I would go and do anything that I had learned that other people found valuable. I would go and try to teach them. One of the early startups I did was part of the Andreessen Horowitz portfolio very early. And they would start asking me, hey, I went down the whole growth hacking rabbit hole. So I got really into all the growth hacking stuff. They're like, can you teach some of this to the other portfolio? Absolutely. Bring it to me. Now, I built relationships through that have just pulled me along in my career. So I do think that having that pay it forward attitude and having no expectation of anything in return is how things come back to you. It's like total karma, but I really just believe in that. I also think that the one thing about universities in the United States, for the most part, I think there's anomalies like Northeastern or a few others that do the co-op programs. They do not teach you what the real world looks like or what opportunities there are when it comes to a career perspective. I finished 2 degrees in mechanical engineering, and then after multiple internships, was pretty clear that's not what I wanted to do. I had no idea what else existed. My parents are doctors. I know there are lawyers. I know there are teachers, but I had no idea what else existed. You know, a lot of friends went into finance. That obviously was one direction, but I ended up getting a role as a product manager. I had never even heard the term product manager until they hired me to do it. I had no idea what that entailed, but I had an engineering degree, so they would hire me for it. And I think that that's a disservice to people. And I always tell people as well, there's something about inertia where if you go into a role and it's comfortable, you know, you don't love it, but they're not going to fire you and it's okay. There's a lot of inertia there. If you start just popping your head up to see what else exists, you will find that there's so many opportunities. There's so many things you never even knew. And if you're a curious person, so many industries that also you may not even know exist. And I think that oftentimes just having those conversations, being curious and trying to learn about other things will pull you in directions that hopefully align with whatever path you want to be on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know a lot of people don't take that train of thought, right? They put their head down, they work on the role that they were hired for, and they don't think about what's happening outside of the bubble that they're in their current job. And you're doing yourself a disservice if all you're doing is focusing on the thing that you were hired to do and nothing else happening in the community. And you heard it here. If you want to live life at 3x speed, like Elaine does, you got to lift your head up and take it from somebody that does not have a technical degree. I wish I would have spent more time and energy earlier on in my career learning about systems thinking and everything that you probably learned at Stanford, because I've had to learn it later on in life in my career. And it's been a lot harder for me to get through that. And there's a lot of value If you're in a role that allows you to do that, please stick with it if you're listening. But man, I 100% support that statement on the systems thinking.
The other thing outside of systems thinking that I think is really important for people in general to study is psychology. I never studied it formally, but everything in the world is based off of human psychology and incentive alignment. And if you can figure those things out early, all of a sudden the world starts to make sense, because things don't make sense if you don't understand that. Why did this happen? That's not fair. This shouldn't be the way it works. That's the way the world works. And one of the things I often tell people, again, should this be the way it works? No. But if you are younger in your career, earlier in your career, and you like where you are, you like your job, the best way to get promoted, the best way to get ahead is to make your boss look really good. Because you know what? They are the gatekeeper for you. And if they love you, they're going to pull you up. They're going to promote you. They're going to take you wherever they go. And if you make them good and make them look good and you make them successful, wherever they go, now you're going to become more and more successful. And again, it's not something that people tell you outright. It's psychology. Everyone is motivated by one of three things typically. It's, can you help me make more money? Can you help me get a promotion? Or can you help me look good to either peers or superiors? And if you can help be in service of that, they will not forget that. They will remember you for that. So one piece of advice that's a little bit not talked about enough. That's a great piece of advice.
Well, it's great. And I grew up more on the psychology side with a marketing degree, but it's what fascinates me most about marketing. But I 100% agree. 100%. All right. That's what we had. Elaine, thank you for joining us. Where can people go to learn more about living life at 3x speed? I've written your book for you, but that's what it's going to be, a book, and you're going to write it in the Italian, like some countryside in Italy at some point.
Done. I'm going to write that in my to-do list for the future. That and a healthcare company. At some point, I'm doing something in healthcare because broken space. Yeah. I am Elaine at tofuhq.com if anybody wants to chat with me. I'm not big into social media, except I've kind of leaned into LinkedIn, so you can find me there, ping me, DM me. I'm usually pretty responsive because I have a lot of FOMO.
Yes, she does a great job on LinkedIn. I can attest. So keep it up, Elaine. All right. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.